Imagine trying to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool with nothing but a standard garden hose. You turn it on, and for the first several hours, you aren't even seeing a rise in the water level. You're just creating a shallow, muddy puddle that doesn't even look like a pool yet. You're putting in $500 a month, every single month, sacrificing the dinners out, the new tech, and the convenience. At the end of a grueling year, you have $6,000 from your own hard labor and a pathetic $300 from interest. Your brain screams at you. Why bother? You feel like you are pouring your life into a leak, not a pool. This is the puddle phase, the invisible threshold where compound interest is essentially a lie, and it is exactly where 90% of people abandon their future because they've been sold a narrative that building wealth should feel like progress from day one. And this is the first correction you have to make if you want to survive long enough to become wealthy. The early years are not designed to feel rewarding. They are designed to test whether you can operate without applause. They are designed to expose whether your nervous system can tolerate delayed evidence. Below $100,000, wealth building is not a story about magical returns. It is a story about whether you can repeatedly behave in ways that feel anticlimactic, socially invisible, and emotionally unvalidated while the mathematics are still too small to defend you. That is why the first phase feels less like investing and more like carrying wet cement uphill in the dark. It is not because the system is broken. It is because at low capital levels, the system is brutally honest about who is actually doing the work. And for a long time, it is you. This is the neuro-mathematical trap. People talk about compound interest as if it begins the moment you open an account, but functionally, psychologically, below $100,000, compound interest is mostly decorative. It exists on paper, but your labor is doing nearly all of the lifting. Your deposits matter more than your returns. Your behavior matters more than your portfolio. Your capacity to keep showing up matters more than your optimization strategy. If you have $10,000 invested and the market returns 10% in a year, you made $1,000. Useful, yes. Transformational, no. If you contributed $12,000 through your paycheck during that same period, then labor produced over 90% of your progress. But your brain is not built to honor that distinction calmly. Your brain wants visible causality. Your brain wants an immediate exchange. Effort in, reward out. You save aggressively for 6 months and nothing in your life appears more luxurious. You cut spending and your social media feed fills with people on rooftops, in airport lounges, unboxing things they cannot afford. You look at your account and experience cognitive price dissonance. You know rationally that you are improving your position, but emotionally it feels like deprivation without spectacle. This is where many people make the fatal accounting error. They confuse invisibility with ineffectiveness. They decide that because the graph does not yet look cinematic, the process is not working. But the process is working. It is just working in a range too small for your emotions to respect. Wealth in the beginning is not a fireworks display. It is a pressure gradient. It is a set of quiet directional decisions accumulating beneath your threshold of excitement. The tragedy is that most people quit precisely because the numbers are telling the truth. The truth is that the first 10 years can feel boring, uneven, almost insulting. The truth is that the returns do not become emotionally persuasive until the base is large enough. The truth is that the machine only starts to look beautiful after you have spent years building it in a warehouse no one visits. So, when you are under 100,000, stop asking whether it feels motivating. That is the wrong diagnostic question. Ask whether the process is mathematically sound. Ask whether the inputs are consistent. Ask whether the architecture makes quitting harder than continuing. Because below 100,000, enthusiasm is a liability. You cannot build a durable financial life on moods that require visual encouragement. The puddle phase punishes anyone waiting to feel inspired. And the reason this punishment feels so intimate, so humiliating, is because it collides directly with ancient tribal wiring. Your nervous system was not designed for index funds, payroll automation, and 15-year accumulation schedules. It was designed for immediate survival loops. Your ancestors needed rapid feedback. Find food, eat food, survive. Spot threat, avoid threat, survive. Belong to the tribe, keep status, survive. The brain that kept humans alive was not a portfolio manager. It was a short-term pattern detector optimized for urgency. Now place that ancient mechanism inside a modern economy built on financial engineering, frictionless transactions, one-click credit, algorithmic advertising, and quality signaling fraud, and you have a species-wide vulnerability. The marketplace knows your brain prefers the immediate reward over the abstract future. It knows you feel the pain of exclusion more sharply than the pleasure of prudent balance sheet management. It knows that if it can make saving feel socially invisible and spending feel identity-rich, you will volunteer for your own extraction. So you walk through life being told, subtly and constantly, that restraint is failure. That if you are not displaying, upgrading, traveling, tasting, wearing, posting, or consuming at a visible level, you are somehow behind. You are made to feel like a sucker for preserving cash, while others appear to be converting debt into status. You are invited to misread liquidity as scarcity and spectacle as competence. That is how the environment exploits the evolutionary mismatch. It weaponizes your impatience against your future. It reframes discipline as deprivation and impulsivity as self-expression. It teaches you to measure life by visible lifestyle rather than invisible optionality. But optionality is the actual asset. The person with lower visible output and higher retained earnings is often winning while appearing dull. The person whose life looks expensive may be a fragile organism, one missed paycheck away from cascade failure. This is why you have to stop reading other people's consumption as data. Much of what you are seeing is not prosperity. It is theater. It is quality signaling fraud funded by installment plans, revolving balances, lease structures, decompression spending, and unexamined anxiety. The puddle phase becomes survivable the moment you stop demanding that reality compete with performance art. Because your goal is not to look wealthy while your financial infrastructure rots underneath you. Your goal is to become a robust enterprise disguised, for a time, as an ordinary human being. That brings you to the work scam audit, and this part is uncomfortable because it requires you to stop treating your paycheck as a pure number. You do not earn what your salary says. You earn what remains after the job extracts its hidden taxes. You have to calculate the real hourly wage, not the ceremonial one. If you make $100,000 a year, the culture tells you that you are doing well. But if your work requires unpaid commute time, a wardrobe premium, convenience meals, stress purchases, subscription sedation, weekend recovery, delivery app dependence, alcohol-assisted decompression, and periodic retail compensation for burnout, then your income statement is lying to you. A high earner can be a failing business. A modest earner can be a robust enterprise. What matters is not gross revenue. What matters is retained capital after operating expenses, leakages, and vampire costs. Consider the ordinary pattern. You work a draining day. Your prefrontal cortex is depleted. Decision fatigue is high. You do not want to cook, think, plan, or negotiate with complexity. So you buy convenience. $20 here for fast food. $32 there for delivery after fees and tip. $15 for coffee because you are underslept and calling caffeine productivity. $70 for a ride because you are running late. $100 on impulse shopping because your brain wants a symbolic apology for the week it just endured. These are not random acts. These are compensation mechanisms. They are decompression spending. They are the job's hidden aftershocks expressed in consumer form. And because they are emotionally framed as relief, you do not code them as losses, but they are losses. They are taxes levied by an ecosystem that first exhausts you and then sells you anesthetic. The real hourly wage must subtract this. If your commute adds 10 unpaid hours a week, if your job-related convenience spending averages hundreds per month, if your Sundays are consumed by dread recovery instead of strategic planning, then your hourly rate may be far lower than you imagine. This matters because many people solve the wrong problem. They chase more income without auditing the extraction architecture attached to that income. They upgrade salary and upgrade leakage in the same motion. Suddenly, the $100,000 earner is not a wealthy person. They are a highly compensated pass-through entity. Money arrives and leaves with similar speed. The machine is loud but unprofitable. Meanwhile, someone making 60 or 70,000 with low fixed costs, boring routines, and high expenditure awareness may be quietly compounding retained earnings with superior efficiency. That person is not glamorous, but they are metabolizing income into capital at a higher rate. And in the puddle phase, conversion efficiency matters more than ego. You do not need a more exciting financial identity. You need a more truthful ledger. You need forensic honesty about what your labor actually produces after the ecosystem has taken its cut. Now, if you hear this and think the solution is stronger motivation, more hustle, or a dramatic personality transformation, you are already drifting back into the willpower myth. Wealth is not built by becoming a heroic version of yourself every morning. It is built by constructing architectural systems that make your weaker self less dangerous. The wealthy are not people with saintly discipline. They are often just people who stopped negotiating with themselves so often. They automated the good behavior and added friction to the bad behavior. They understood that the prefrontal cortex is an expensive resource and should not be wasted making the same low-level decision every day. So the tactical reframe is simple but not simplistic. Stop trying to feel like a disciplined person and start behaving like a systems engineer. If you know saving is correct, then remove the requirement to choose it manually each month. Automate transfers so the money leaves before your identity can interfere. If you overspend when exhausted, then do not build a lifestyle that requires evening virtue. Create boring meal routines, repeatable breakfasts, interchangeable lunches, a short list of acceptable dinners. This is not aesthetic failure. This is cognitive load reduction. You are trying to preserve executive function for decisions with asymmetric upside, not squander it. Debating whether to order something because the day was emotionally expensive. Then there is the $20 rule, which sounds trivial until you understand its neurological role. Before any non-essential purchase over $20, you wait. Maybe 24 hours. Maybe longer. The dollar amount is less important than the interruption. You are installing a speed bump between impulse and action. The goal is not denial for its own sake. The goal is to reintroduce temporal distance so emotion cannot masquerade as necessity. Most bad spending does not survive delay. It needs immediacy to feel legitimate. Once you interrupt the sequence, the glamour drains out of it. This is what friction does. It exposes false urgency. You should make good decisions easy and bad decisions slightly annoying. Delete stored card information from fast apps. Use a separate account for discretionary spending. Keep your investment transfers invisible and recurring. Make your emergency fund hard enough to access that boredom cannot reach it, but not so hard that actual emergencies become theatrical. Unsexy habits are what keep the puddle intact while it is still shallow. People crave elegant breakthroughs because boring systems insult the ego. But boring systems are exactly what survive contact with real life. Inspiration fails when you are tired, lonely, angry, underslept, socially pressured, or mildly depressed, which is to say, inspiration fails under ordinary human conditions. Clinical consistency does not require you to be exceptional. It requires the environment to keep nudging you toward the mathematically inevitable path, even when your feelings are noisy. This is why the enthusiasm model is so destructive. You were sold the idea that change begins with a revelation, a burst of certainty, a perfectly curated Monday, a notebook, a playlist, a declaration. But financial progress is not a cinematic montage. It is not built on moments that feel powerful. It is built on repetition so ordinary that the ego cannot extract identity from it. That is why so many people cannot tolerate it. They do not just want wealth. They want the emotional experience of becoming wealthy to feel meaningful every week. They want a narrative high. They want evidence they are transforming. The puddle phase offers none of that. It offers no applause, no visual spectacle, no dramatic lifestyle difference, no immediate social reward. It is all substrate, all plumbing, all hidden beams. So if you continue demanding emotional stimulation from a process whose nature is delayed reinforcement, you will sabotage yourself again and again. You will keep restarting. You will mistake novelty for progress. You will consume financial content not to improve behavior, but to feel the temporary relief of proximity to competence. And that relief will become its own vice. Knowledge without structural implementation is just psychological decoration. The person who watches 100 videos about money but still manually decides every transfer is still exposed. The person who earns a large salary but leaks it through convenience taxes, status maintenance, and emotional spending is still exposed. The person with a modest salary, low burn, high automation, and a refusal to turn exhaustion into consumption is quietly hardening into something powerful. This is the challenge to the salary myth. Income matters, yes. It increases the speed of accumulation, but salary alone does not create wealth any more than revenue alone creates a durable company. If expenses scale to consume the income, if the nervous system is still in charge of every purchase, if the job's invisible costs are eroding retained capital, then high income simply means you are processing larger numbers through a weak system. A failing business can have impressive top-line revenue. A robust enterprise is the one that keeps what matters, allocates deliberately, and survives shocks. You need to stop asking, "How much do you make?" and start asking, "How much of what enters your life remains under your control?" And then, somewhere around $100,000, something strange happens. Not magical, not mystical, mechanical. The numbers begin to talk back. The capital starts to develop a personality. The puddle begins, almost imperceptibly at first, to resemble a pool. You still contribute, of course, you still work, you still save. But now the returns are no longer decorative. At $100,000, a 10% year is $10,000. Suddenly, a bad month at work is not the only thing influencing your financial trajectory. A good year in the market can rival or exceed what you were able to save through sacrifice alone. This is the inversion point. The boulder begins to crest the hill. Capital starts to work hard enough that you can feel it. The machine is no longer purely hand-cranked. Momentum appears. And this is where people who survive the puddle phase gain an advantage that looks from the outside like luck or genius. It is neither. It is delayed mechanical leverage. The wealthy often appear patient because the system eventually starts rewarding patience visibly. But before that stage, patience is mostly unsupported by feedback, which is why it is rare. Once the base is large enough, the game changes qualitatively. Down markets look different because your ongoing contributions buy more. Up markets look different because the absolute dollar changes are no longer trivial. You begin to experience the first real evidence that money can work while you sleep, not because that sentence was always emotionally true, but because it has finally become numerically legible. The geometry has changed. The slope has changed. What was once a puddle starts to hold depth. This is the phase transition most people never reach, not because it was impossible, but because they kept treating the early silence as proof of failure. They walked away before the inversion point. They abandoned the runway because they mistook a long acceleration period for permanent stagnation. But if you understand the architecture, you stop personalizing the delay. You stop asking why it is taking so long as though the universe singled you out. It is taking so long because small bases produce small outputs. That is not punishment. That is arithmetic. And once you accept that, a profound calm becomes available to you. You no longer need daily inspiration because you finally understand the sequence. You no longer need to be sold hope through emotional language because the structure itself is enough. You are not waiting for motivation. You are administering a process. So the real victory in the puddle phase is not that you become richer, at least not at first. The real victory is perceptual. You stop seeing yourself as a failing aspirant and start seeing yourself as a pattern-detecting machine conducting expenditure awareness in a hostile environment. You see the invisible equations. You see that every convenience has a shadow cost. Every exhausted purchase has a lineage. Every subscription, fee, impulse, and identity-driven expense is either feeding the machine or corroding it. You see that boredom is not evidence that the strategy is weak. Boredom is often evidence that the strategy has finally escaped entertainment and entered reality. You see that your job is not to outfeel the economy. Your job is to read it clearly enough that you stop volunteering for mathematically disastrous patterns. You do not need to become a more optimistic person. You need to become less narratively manipulable, less responsive to quality signaling fraud, less seduced by visible lifestyles financed by fragile infrastructure, more interested in net retention than emotional theater, more willing to look ordinary while building extraordinary optionality. Because that is what the first $100,000 really buys you, long before it buys luxury. It buys strategic breathing room. It buys a reduction in desperation. It buys the first authentic distance between your identity and your next paycheck. It buys the right to make decisions with slightly less fear. And if you understand that, then the puddle phase stops being an insult and becomes an initiation. Not glamorous, not inspiring, not photogenic, but real. Quietly real. You survive it by accepting that the early years are a construction site, not a showroom. You survive it by making peace with invisible progress. You survive it by replacing moral drama with systems design, replacing self-blame with forensic clarity, replacing willpower with architecture, and replacing the fantasy of quick transformation with the mathematics of accumulated non-stupidity. Then one day the water level is no longer theoretical. One day the pool starts looking like a pool. One day the machine you built underneath your life starts humming loudly enough that even your primitive brain can hear it. And when that day arrives, you will understand something most people never do. The hard part was never choosing the right stock, or finding the perfect side hustle, or waiting for a bigger salary. The hard part was surviving the period when the truth was working, but still looked small. Like this video, if you're currently in the puddle phase, you're not alone. We are building the architecture underneath the machine.